Good evening, guys. Welcome to the session. So we are starting a new initiative where we'll be covering previous year's question papers, and we'll see how to go about this papers. I mean the previous year's question papers. So we'll go into the macro and micro level analysis of the papers. I hope these sessions are useful. So we'll wait for some time and for people to join the session and then start the session. Good evening, Shweta. So this session is only meant for people, meant for all the people who are not who don't know how to analyze the previous year's question papers. And this sessions will only be about the analysis, and I'll not get into the nitty-gritties of the questions and the answers. This will be mainly the macro and macro level analysis of the paper. So, and we'll also discuss what kind of questions can come and what you have to do when you see certain questions and how you have to prepare. So we'll start with the session. So today is exactly 2 months from the the day when we started the sessions. So we had started CSAT sessions from March 8th. Today is May 8th. I hope these sessions are useful and fruitful. So we'll start with this 2011 paper. We will be doing till 2022. And we are planning to actually conduct 2 sessions in a day, so that in 5 days we can complete the whole 10 years papers. And I'll not get into the details of the answers and all. I'll just tell you how to go about the analysis part. So this is 2011 paper. So the first question is about in the union budget, a full exemption from the basic customs duty was extended to the bio-based asphalt. What is the importance of this material? So the first thing that you have to notice is union budget. So even this year's union budget is important, and any new initiative that any new steps that the government has taken, you have to go through that. And they are saying that there was an exemption that was provided in that year's 2011 and 12 exemption. Customs duty exemption was given to bio-based asphalt. So bio-based asphalt is a material that is used to prepare roads. So whatever, if you come across anything which is bio-based, look out for that. And also read the question here. This thing is very important. What is the importance of this material? So whenever you come across any material, even now when you are reading PT 365 and you come across any material, if the PT 365 has not given the importance of that material, it's your duty to Google search that and read about the importance of that material. So they're asking the importance of that material. Any new material is there, anything that is bio-based. For example, if they are non-renewable, and from non-renewable they are they're using a renewable sources. So you have to read about that. And you just have to not just have to read about the basics of it, you have to also read what is the importance of that material. So here it is about bio-based asphalt. I'll not get into the details of this question and how to answer this question. That is already done by many people. What I'm trying to do is to give you a direction of how to prepare using the previous year's question paper. So always be in the lookout for these things. This paper, there are only 2 documents that are very important. One is the syllabus. Second is your previous year's question paper. And third, I would say, is the Constitution of India. These are the three documents that any aspirant should be very well versed with. So this is the first question. Then going on to the second question, consider the following. Which of the above are the emissions are the emissions from the coal combustion of thermal power plants? So they are asking what are the emissions from a coal combustion. Coal is an important topic. You have to read about the different types of coal and what are the mines, famous mines for coal mines that are there. The location of the mines, that's also a geography question. The location based or mapping question. And then they're asking about the emissions part. So you have to go through the emissions part and also the steps taken to reduce these emissions. The steps taken to reduce these emissions is also important. And the regulation part of coal. How the coal is regulated. Which ministries are involved. The ministries that are involved in coal mining and coal extraction and everything. So we have to go through this, and coal has actually repeated many times in the papers. So coal is an important topic. You have to go through the from the very basics to the very higher level here. From understanding what is coal, how coal is produced, and then the types of coal, and then the steps that are taken to reduce the coal emissions. For example, and here in this case, it's a bio-based asphalt. Asphalt is for making roads. So if you come across any technology where that technology is, a technology or materials is used to making roads, that becomes important. And the main idea is you need to know the importance of this material, any new material that has been in the news. And now when you are talking about emissions, this is about gaseous emissions. So you have to know who are the regulators of the emissions, gaseous emissions, how are they controlling it, and what are the chemicals that are being produced from these emissions, and also the effects of these chemicals on human beings. That is also important. The third question, satellites used for telecommunication relay are kept in geostationary orbit. A satellite is said to be in such an orbit when you have the details here. So the things that you have to learn from this question is you have to learn about satellites, the kinds of satellites that are there that India sends, and what kind of satellites are used for what purposes. And then also about the orbits. What kind of orbits are there? For example, one orbit is geosynchronous orbit. There may be other orbits also. And what kind of orbits are used for what purposes? What purpose? Purpose is also important. Because they have asked here that they are telecommunication satellites or relay. So you have to understand, you have to learn that, you have to read about the satellites, read about the orbits, different kinds of orbits, read about the purpose of what kinds of satellites are used in what kinds of orbits, and also the launch vehicles that are used to launching these satellites. If recently there has been any launches of satellites, so for example, there is PSLV, GSLV. So read about all that. And that is important. I mean, in these days, if you are going through PT 365 or any basic stuff, just go through the basics of these orbits and satellites. And for example, you can also go through about the basic centrifugal forces. I mean, they may ask. The fourth question is, India has experienced persistent and high food inflation. In the recent past, what could be the reasons? So this is an economics question, high food inflation. They are saying, so what you have to learn from this question is, you have to understand what is inflation, different kinds of inflation that is there, and why the inflation is happening, the reasons for that inflation is happening. For example, even today, there is a high food inflation that is happening. You have to understand the reasons of it. So go through the reasons, understand why the inflation is happening. In this case, they have told about the switch over to the cultivation of commercial crops, and the areas that are under the cultivation food grains has decreased, and the consumption pattern has changed, and there is a supply chain constraints. Currently, there was during the COVID time, there was a supply chain constraint also. So you have to, in this question, you have to takeaway is you have to learn about the inflation, types of inflation, and why the inflation is happening. If currently some inflation, if there is a high inflation, you have to understand why that inflation is happening. So there are different types of inflation also, you have to read about that. Then fifth question. At present, scientists can determine the arrangements or relative positions of genes or DNA sequence on a chromosome. How does this knowledge benefit us? It is possible to know the pedigree of livestock. It is possible to understand the cause of all human diseases. It is possible to develop disease-resistant animal breeds. For me, the answer, what is the correct answer for this is not important. If you are analyzing it at a macro level, you have to understand what is genes, what is a DNA, what is a chromosome, and if there is anything related to DNA and chromosomes, how does this knowledge benefit us? For example, if there is a new technology, you have to understand how this knowledge will help us. And even if you are reading biotechnology, science and technology topics, if they have not given what are the benefits of it, you have to Google search that. The sixth question, in terms of economy, the visit by foreign nationals to witness the Commonwealth Games is amounted to. So this is a conceptual question from economics. They're asking you, they're giving you a certain example. They're giving you a certain example. And they are asking you, what does it amount to? Is it export, import, production, or consumption? So these kinds of questions can be asked. I mean, they can ask you, they'll give you a certain example. For example, they can give you a detail of why a particular inflation is happening, and then they can tell you or ask you what type of inflation is that. Or they can, this requires understanding of the concepts of economics. Understand the concepts and understand the application part of it. This is applied economics. They're giving you a scenario and they're asking you what type of, what is the concepts that are involved, whether that is import or export or production or consumption. So whatever terms you come across in the economics, clearly understand it and have understand the examples also, how that is contributed. For example, in inflation, there is demand pull inflation, cost push inflation. So you have to understand what is a demand pull inflation, and if in the future, if they give you an example and say that, for example, in COVID, there was, everyone wanted a laptop, but there was no laptop available, so laptop prices increased. And they may give you the options that whether this is demand pull, cost push inflation and all that. So you have to clearly understand the concept of the economics words. What is inflation? What is deflation? What is types of inflation and all that. Then seventh question, microbial fuel cells are considered a source of sustainable energy. Why? This is also reason. They're asking why it is a source of sustainable energy, and they're asking about microbial fuel cells. So the one takeaway from this question is you have to understand what is microbial fuel cells, how it is useful to humans, and what are the benefits of it. So this is one takeaway from this. The other understanding that you have to take away here is you have to know about the sources of sustainable energy. The sources of sustainable energy is very important. So whenever you come across this, any sustainable energy, for example, right now we are talking about hydrogen-based fuels. So those becomes important because that is the sources of sustainable energy is already asked in the previous year's questions. So they use living organisms such as catalyst. I mean, these are the details. I do not want to go into this. But the main takeaway from this question is you have to learn about any biofuels that are there, or any natural fuels that can be used, and any type of sustainable source of energies and why they are useful. And you have to know the basics of it, and then the usefulness, why it is useful. Then the next question is, which of the following statement appropriately describes fiscal stimulus? You have to see, again, this question actually says what is fiscal stimulus, and they'll give you examples here. That's what I'm saying, applied economics. They'll not give you just the theoretical part, they'll give you examples. They'll tell you what are the steps that the government is taking, and then which one describes this fiscal stimulus. So fiscal stimulus is nothing but you are changing the expenditure or the income and using income and expenditure. The government is trying to control the inflation part. So if you understand the concepts, you can apply that concept, and you have to apply that concept to get the answers. So these type of questions are being asked these days. Economic questions are getting, more, they are becoming applied. So you have to clearly understand the concept And you have to find the use examples also. What kind of steps that government are taking, and how can that be classified? I hope things are clear. If you have any doubts in this, kinds of analysis, please ask in the chat section. I'm trying to rush because I have to cover 10 years topic. In the meanwhile, if you have any questions, please post it in the chat section. The 9th question, the formation of ozone hole in the Antarctic region has been a cause of concern. What could be the reason of formation of this ozone hole? So the takeaway from this is you have to read about the ozone hole, the uses of the ozone hole, and if there is this formation of a hole, what are the reasons of that hole? The cause of that hole. What could be the reasons for the formation of that hole? And now, how to analyze the other parts? The presence of prominent tropospheric turbulence, chlorofluorocarbons. So you have to understand, you have to Google search about tropospheric turbulence. What is chlorofluorocarbons? And then in the second option, there is presence of prominent polar front and stratospheric clouds. So these are new topics that you have to read. Absence of polar front and stratospheric clouds and inflow of methane and chlorofluorocarbons. Increased temperature at polar region due to global warming. So you have to understand what is a ozone, what are the uses, what is the reason for creation of this ozone hole, and what are the steps that are taken by the government and international measures that they are taking. International level also of international measures that they are taking, and also the reasons for the formation of this hole, and what is ozone. And if, for example, if there is anything about ozone in the science textbooks from 6th to 10th standard, you have to read that. That is also important. And other things are the tropospheric turbulence and the chlorofluorocarbons, and how these are causing ozone depletion, and what are the benefits of and ozone also causes, ozone is beneficial at a higher level in the atmosphere, but it has a negative effect in the lower level. So you have to read about that also. And the steps that are taken by the government and also international treaties or measures that are targeted towards ozone hole. The next question is 10th question. Consider the following actions which the government can take. One is devaluing the domestic currency, reduction in export subsidy, adopting suitable policies which attract greater FDI and more funds from FIIs. Which of the following actions can help in reducing current account deficit? See, again, this question is about current account deficit and how can you decrease the current account deficit. So these are all conceptual questions. You have to understand what is current account deficit and whether there are any steps that are taken by the government to reduce current account deficit. If the current account deficit increases, what will happen? If the current account deficit decreases, what will happen? These are the things that you have to read. Whenever you are reading that, you have to understand what is actually a current account deficit, how it is created, how it can be reduced, and what will happen if it increases, what will happen if it decreases, and what are the steps that the government is taking to reduce that. There is a policy, the FRBM Act that the government has passed. So you can go through that also. So these are all important topics. And this is how you have to understand or take important things from previous year's questions. I hope this is clear. If you have any doubts, please post it in the comment section. Then the 11th question, the Constitutional Amendment Act 1992, which aims at promoting Panchayat Raj institutions in the country, provides for what? So you have to, first thing that you have to take away from this is the Constitutional Amendment Act is important. You have to almost by heart all the important constitutional amendments. And you have to go through, for example, if there are important amendments, for example, Panchayat Raj institutions, go into the details of it. And they are talking about the constitution of district planning committees. Go through this. Currently, election is happening in Karnataka. Go through the state election commission also in the Lakshmikant. And then there are the state finance commission. So from this, you have to understand that you have to read all the amendments of the constitution. You have to by heart it. You have to read about the details of it. And here they have asked about the district planning committees. So this amendment and the provisions in that amendment, they're asking you the details of it. And you have to understand that district planning committees, you have to search And when I'm telling you all this, please note down what you have to do, to-do list. And when you are reading a static part, emphasize on these things. The Panchayat Raj institutions are important. Election to the Panchayat Raj institutions are important. Revenue sources of the Panchayat Raj institutions are important. So all these are important here, because the third level or the grassroots level institutions are very important from the prelims point of view. I hope this is clear. Then 12th question is two important rivers. One has a source in Jharkhand and another with its source in Odisha. Merge at a place only a short distance from the coast of Bay of Bengal before flowing into the sea. This is an important site of wildlife and biodiversity and a protected area. Which one of the following could be this? So you have to at least go through the rivers, and if there are any in the current affairs, if there is any special sites for biodiversity and wildlife importance, you have to go through that. So this question is about rivers, and you have to go through at least the rivers, the major rivers and its tributaries, and whether it has going or passing through any cities, or wildlife sanctuaries or national parks. That is important here. And just go through these places also. Just Google search what is Bhitarkanika, Chandipuramsi, Gopalpuramsi, and Simplipal. So like this, you have to go about the do secondary research of previous year's topics. Then again, this is a conceptual question. A rapid increase in the rate of inflation is sometimes attributed to base effect. And what is base effect? So they're actually asking a conceptual question. They're asking, it is the impact of drastic deficiency in the supply due to failure of crops. So this is related to inflation. So inflation is important. Anything related to inflation is also important. And they're asking that conceptual question also. So go through these terms. What is base effect? What is inflation? Types of inflation? How to control inflation? What are the steps that the government is taking? For example, there are two types of tackling it. One is through fiscal policy and through monetary policy. So these types of things that you have to learn whenever you are dealing about, whenever you are going through the basic textbooks. Then India is regarded as a country with demographic dividend. This is due to. So this is the very basic and conceptual question. It attacks the very definition of demographic dividend. So you have to understand what is demographic dividend, how it is useful, and how does India benefit from demographic dividend. That's more than enough. If you learn the definitions, why that demographic dividend is, when they are saying India is regarded as a country with demographic dividend, just the reason of it. The 15th question is regarding carbon credits, which one of the following is not correct? So carbon credits are important. So read about carbon credits. What is carbon credits? Why it is used? Why, what, and why it is used? And how it is useful for the country? How it is useful for us as for India as a country and also for everyone. So the carbon credit system was ratified in conjunction with the Kyoto Protocol. So read about the Kyoto Protocol. Write down these things when you are going through the videos. Write it down. Carbon credits are awarded to the countries or that have reduced greenhouse gases. The goal of the carbon credit is to limit the increase of the carbon dioxide emissions. So they are talking about the goal, and carbon credits are traded at a fixed price. So you have to understand, you have to learn about carbon credits. What is it? Why is it used? How it is useful? And where it is traded and how it is priced. And these are the things that you have to learn. And the very first thing is why the carbon credits. And what are the alternatives other than carbon credits to control the emissions. Which of the following is not a feature of value added tax? So now instead of value added tax, they can ask you about GST. So read about GST, read about the basics of GST, how the GST is collected, how the money is distributed among the states. So read the basic things. It's a multi-point destination-based system of taxation. It's levied on the value addition at each stage of the transaction. It's a tax on final consumption of goods, and it is borne by the consumer. And it's basically a subject of central government, and state government are only a facilitator for its successful implementation. So the same things can be applicable to the GST also. You have to understand the same things in terms of GST. Who is responsible for fixing GST? There is something called GST Council. Go through that structure. How often do they meet? How the voting is done? Who has the ultimate power? And how does the funding the funds is distributed? And what is GST? Now, types of economy. This question is about the closed economy. So this is a basic economics question. In the first chapter, they tell you what is the type of economy that is there. Here they have asked just the details of it. What is a closed economy? But they can give you an example, give you a description of a country or an economy, and then ask you what type of economy is it. They can reverse this question also. So read the types of economy: closed economy, other types of economy that is there. That is very important. And India is what type of economy? India is a mixed economy. And here, the next question is: when the bark of a tree is removed in a circular fashion all around near its base, it gradually dries up because this is about the structure and functions of the parts of tree. Of a part of a tree. So don't neglect this. Tree or a plant. Read about the roots, types of roots, types of that, for example, xylem, phloem, and the difference between animal cell and plant cell. All these are important. And they are saying if the bark is cut, it dries up, and why does it dry up? This is also an application of it. Then the 19th question. The new START treaty was in news because the START treaty was related with the nuclear doctrines. So if there is any treaty that is there in news regarding nuclear proliferation, go through that. Nuclear is very important. Nuclear, they can ask you about anything about nuclear technologies, and nuclear power. In geography, they can ask you in the mapping nuclear power plants that are there in India, and any nuclear treaties that India has signed, and the global agency that is responsible for looking after the nuclear reactors and nuclear plants, and also nuclear weapons. If there is any global treaty and global organization that is looking after it. Global organizations. So you have to read about the nuclear technologies also, how power is generated using nuclear technology, what types of fuels are used. For example, uranium and thorium can be used. Uranium and thorium. So you have to understand that even in geography, they'll ask you about the mining related questions regarding uranium and thorium. And also, for example, they had asked about in Rajasthan whether uranium deposits are there or not. And also they have asked about the sands in Kerala, where thorium is available. So you have to go through the availability of these minerals in India, their locations. For example, it comes in mapping also. And as in the nuclear technology for power generation, you have to read about how the electricity is generated. And you have to go through those technologies. The next question, 20th question is, 3 of the following criteria have contributed to the recognition of Western Ghats, Sri Lanka and Indo-Burma regions of biodiversity hotspots. Biodiversity hotspot is important for mapping, and why the biodiversity hotspots are important to humans. Why it is important to humans. Why is biodiversity important to humans? I mean, that is the most basic thing. And then how do you classify a biodiversity hotspot? That is the criteria that they have asked here. And they can ask you a similar question here, or the location of any biodiversity hotspots. So please go through that. Next is 21st question. Human activities in the recent past have caused increased concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, but a lot of it does not remain in the lower atmosphere because of. So carbon dioxide does not remain in the lower atmosphere, and they're asking you the reasons for it. It escapes into the outer stratosphere, the photosynthesis by phytoplanktons in the oceans, the trapping of air in the polar ice caps. So go through this about carbon dioxide, the emissions of carbon dioxide and the impacts of carbon dioxide, and why it is not there in the atmosphere, doesn't stay in the atmosphere. And when you're talking about atmosphere, you should also know the layers of atmosphere and the uses of each layer. For example, ionospheres, they've asked a question, why ionosphere is important. So go through the layers of atmosphere here. So these are how you have to go through the basics also when you're going through these previous year's questions. 22nd question. In the context of ecosystem productivity, marine upwelling zones are important as they increase the marine productivity by bringing. So they are asking what is marine upwelling zones and how they are important and how they are increasing the marine productivity. Decomposing microorganisms, bringing the decomposer microorganisms to the surface, nutrient to the surface, bottom dwelling organisms to the surface. This is a static portion. Go through this concept and go through this marine upwelling zones and how it is useful for the increasing marine productivity. I hope things are clear. If you have any doubts, you can post it in the chat section. 23rd question. If a tropical rainforest is removed, it does not regenerate quickly as compared to a tropical deciduous forest. What is the reason? So one thing is you have to read about the different types of forests that are there. Equatorial forest, tropical rainforest, tropical deciduous forest. All those forests you have to read. Then you have to read the features of it. Features, and then the kinds of flora and fauna that is found in. Flora is plants, fauna is animals. So in each forest, you have to understand what are the geographical climatic conditions in that forest and the features of it, and the flora or fauna that is flora and fauna that is typical for that type of forest. These kinds of questions are already asked, and they are asking these kinds of questions. So go through that. I mean, go through this topic. I'm not going through the details of it. I'm just giving you an indication of how to prepare the topic here. So whenever you're going through the basics NCERT textbooks, read about the forest and then the features and the unique flora and fauna that is available in that particular forest. Then the Himalayan range is very rich in species diversity. Which among the following is the most appropriate reason for this phenomenon? The Himalayan range is very rich in diversity, and what is the reason for it? So you have to go through this questions. For example, it has high rainfall that supports luxuriant vegetative growth. It is a confluence of different biogeographical zones. This is important. Biogeographical zones, exotic and invasive species. So at least understand what is exotic and invasive species. And then go through these things. I mean, why Himalayan range is rich in diversity, and what is biogeographical zones, and what are the different biogeographical zones that are there, and how do they classify these biogeographical zones. And then learn about what is exotic species, what is invasive species, and if, for example, if there is in current affairs, if there has been any discussion about any particular kind of invasive species, which is there, which can be a flora and also fauna also, plant or an animal which is invasive. So read about the basic conceptual things about invasive species, exotic species, biogeographical zones, and the diversity of Himalayan range. Next. With reference to India, following central acts: Import and Export Control Act 1947, Mining and Mineral Development Act 1957, Customs Act 1962, and Indian Forest Act 1927. Which of the following acts have a bearing or have relevance or bearing on biodiversity conservation in the country? See, biodiversity conservation is important. This is asked every time. What are the steps that the government is taking? And you go through these acts. These acts are very, very important. They have asked many times. Mining and Mineral Development Act, Customs Act, Indian Forest Act, and Import and Export Act. And see how this act is helpful in controlling or ensuring biodiversity in India. Then the 26th question is Karl Marx. Explain the process of class struggle with the help of which of the following theories? Read about these theories: empirical liberalism, existentialism, Darwin's theory of evolution, and dialectical materialism. At least go through this. At least go through the Karl Marx principles and what he has explained. And these are the things that you have to take away from these questions. See, I had earlier discussed about atmosphere and the layers of atmosphere and its uses. So there is a question here. A layer in the Earth's atmosphere called ionosphere facilitates radio communication. Why? Why is it important? So ionosphere is important and all the layers of Earth's atmosphere is important. Go through each, whenever you are going through the NCERT textbooks, go through each layer and their uses and their properties. So here they have given the, and how does it work? How does ionosphere work and how does it facilitate radio communication? How aspect is also important. How and what are it? What are the layers that are there? So for example, in this question, they have asked the presence of ozone causes the reflection of radio waves. Radio waves have a very long wavelength. So there are wavelength spectrums here. Go through those spectrums. There is UV rays, radio waves, visible wavelength. Go through that and understand what are like the decreasing and the highest frequency, how the frequency and wavelength are related, and how do you transmit data. Those kinds of questions can be also a science and technology based question. So next question is, both foreign direct investment and foreign institutional investors are related to investment in the country. Which one of the following statements best represents an important difference between the two? So FDI and FII are important. You have to understand the concepts of it. You have to understand what is it? I mean, what is foreign direct investment? What is a foreign institutional investor? And what is the difference between these concepts? So normally whenever there is two similar things, they've asked about the differences. It can be science and technology. It can be economics. Whenever there are two closely related things, they'll ask you about the difference. Here they've asked about foreign direct investment and foreign institutional investors. So please go through these basic concepts and the differences. Whenever you are going through any two related things, go through the difference of it. Next, 29th question is, a genetically engineered form of brinjal known as Briti brinjal has been developed. The objective of this is, so why do we use genetically modified animals? Why is important? Then read about Briti brinjal and what are the organizations or the institutions that are looking after this biotechnology related stuff, the regulations part. That is in India, the ministries that are involved, and what are the permissions that is required. Permissions, and currently what are the biotechnology, BT, engineered products that are used, allowed in India, and why we are using it. So biotechnology is also important in mains also. This is a mains topic. So, and they are asking, why do we have to use it? The purpose of this, the objective. So whenever you are reading about any particular technology, new technology, always understand the objective of it. And that's how we have to go through that. Even if you are going through the PT365 now, or any current affairs sources, or any of your static portions, the main objective you have to understand. You have to, at least if it's not there in the textbook, your responsibility is to search through internet. UPSC has given you this thing syllabus, and they're not mentioned the sources because there is no source for this. All the sources are actually formed using previous year's question papers. If they get, for example, they have asked about BT brinjal, next year if they for example, if there was no breeding biotechnology or modified crops, genetically modified crops, they'll add into the textbook next year. So that becomes your basic source. But before that, the original source is the previous year's question paper and syllabus. So go through, if you come across your current affairs in any of your current affairs sources, if you come across any genetically modified organisms or plants, go through that, see what are the concerns, see what is the benefits of it, and the organizations that there is regulatory part of it. How if an organization has to get a permission, what are the ministries or the organizations that they have to approach, and who is monitoring all this, and that is also important. Next, 30th question is Aam Aadmi Bima Yojana. So whenever you go across any schemes, understand the topics, understand the features of those schemes, the purpose of those schemes, and the audience, the stakeholders or the intended beneficiaries. That is important here. So one, what is that scheme, why it is used, why it has been brought out, what is the problem that they want to solve, and what is the targeted audience. That is what they're asking here. See, in this there is 3 parts. The first part is the member insured under the scheme must be the head of the family or the earning member of the family in a rural landless household. The member insured must be in the age group of 30 to 65. There is a provision for free scholarship for up to 2 children of the insured who are studying between 9 to 12. So I'm not teaching you how to eliminate questions, how to approach or solve the questions. I'm just trying to tell you how to go about reading the topics. You have to go through the basics, you have to go through the schemes. So whenever you're going through any scheme, find the features, find the purpose of it, find the intended audience, and find the benefits that they're giving, what the scheme is giving, and to whom it is giving. Then 31st question is, in the context of global oil prices, Brent crude oil is frequently referred to in the news. What does it imply? What is Brent crude? There are WTI and Brent. Now they're asking what is Brent. It is a major classification of crude oil. It is sourced from the North Sea. It does not contain sulfur. So here we have to understand that they've asked you a question here. So you need to know what are the types of crude oil. What are the types of crude oil, where it is found, and what is the chemical composition of these crude oils. What are the chemical compositions, and what type of refineries are used to refine these crude oils. You have to know all this. If these things are not there in the books, you have to Google search. That's your responsibility. You cannot blame it on the static part, static books or standard books. If it is not there, you have to Google search. You have to learn about the types of Brent crude, where it is trading. For example, these Brent crudes are traded every day. So you have to understand how it is traded, where it is available, the source, where it is sourced from, and the chemical composition of it. Whether it contains sulfur, it doesn't contain sulfur. If it contains sulfur, how does it affect the crude oil? Whether if sulfur is there, it is good or not, or if sulfur is not there, which one is good? A crude oil which contains sulfur is good, or a crude oil which doesn't contain sulfur is good. So these kinds of things, basic things, you have to understand. See, I've already told you nuclear thing is important. The function of heavy water in nuclear reactor. Nuclear, everything is important of nuclear things. So here, they have actually asked you about the reactor. And how does the nuclear functioning of a nuclear reactor. This is school level concept. I think 9th or 10th standard concept. Functioning of a nuclear reactor. And what are the parts? In schools, we had actually drawn the diagrams of it. What are the parts of it? Why heavy water is used? And there are control rods. All these things you have to learn. These are there in the 10th, 9th, 8th, 9th standard textbooks. Go through that. These are basics. And if they ask you about nuclear technology, what types of fuels are used, and how, the spent fuel, the wastage is discarded. You have to read all that. and what is the purpose of the parts of this nuclear reactor, and what kinds of reactors are there, and what kinds of like first generation, second generation, third generation reactors are there, what kinds of fuels are used, and what is a new technology or the development of nuclear technologies, and whether it is useful or not, and what are the treaties or international agreements that has happened. For example, India may be importing nuclear fuel from other countries, and I mean there may be restrictions if India is importing from other countries. You have to read about all that. Nuclear treaties are important. Nuclear technologies for power generation is important, and also in geography, the nuclear reactors mapping. The nuclear reactors are also important, and you have to at least know how many nuclear reactors are there, power plants are there, where it is located, which area, which state, whether it is near to any particular national park or not. So next question is 33rd question. In India, if a religious sect is given the status of national minority, what special advantages it is entitled to? It can establish and administer exclusive educational institutions. The President of India automatically nominates the representative of the community to the Lok Sabha. It can derive benefits from the Prime Minister's 15-point program. So the important thing here is the status of national minority. And what are the advantages? What is a national minority? So how it is given? I mean, who can be given a national minority status? Who can get a national minority? Who can get it? How you can get it? And who will declare how a national minority is declared, and the benefits of it. Whether they are talking about national minority, you have to see whether there is a concept of state minority or not. What are the benefit of getting declared a national minority? And for example, now there is the violence going on in Manipur regarding the declaration of scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. Your job is to understand how the government declares a community or a tribe or any group of people, scheduled tribe or scheduled caste, and what is the legal procedure and administrative procedure to declare that. Because you have to understand that the constitution is also in your syllabus. Whether if for example, if they are declaring any community a scheduled caste or a scheduled tribe, whether a constitutional amendment is required or not, and there are different types of constitutional amendment. So you have to find out what kind of constitutional amendment is applicable for at least declaring national minority, state minority, scheduled caste, scheduled tribes. For example, they have asked questions that, for example, if you have to add languages in a schedule of the constitution, what kind of constitutional amendment is required, and the procedure of that amendment, the technicalities of that amendment, all that is given in the Lakshmikant. So go through that. And you have to also understand how minority status is given, whether it's on the basis of the religion, whether it's on the basis of the population or the population or the language that they're speaking. So go through that. That is also important. India is home to lakhs of people with disabilities. What are the benefits available to them under the law? See, in mains, there is a topic called vulnerable sections and schemes for vulnerable sections. People with disabilities are also a part of vulnerable sections. And here they are asking what are the benefits available to them under the law. Your job is to find out other vulnerable sections and the measures or benefits that are available to them under law. For example, here they have told about disabilities, persons with disabilities, free schooling till the age of 18 years in the government schools, preferential allotment of land for setting up of business, ramps in public buildings. So just like this, you have to go through not just about people with persons with disabilities. You have to also understand the government of under the law or under the constitution. For example, for other minorities that are there, religious minorities, and also scheduled caste and scheduled tribes, kids, children who are there, women. So what are the benefits that are available to them under the law, and what are the benefits that the constitution is providing to them? So go through that. and also the articles in the constitution that are related to the disabled people or children, women, or scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. All these are important. And while coming to the articles, you have to by heart all the important articles. They are asking about the articles, they are asking about the DPSPs, and they are asking the application part of it. For example, they'll say, what are the directive principles that are applicable for animals? What are the directive principles or the articles that has a bearing on children? So these kinds of things you have to know. For that, you have to at least know what are the articles and what is it related to. I hope this session is useful. If you have any doubts, please ask. With what purpose of the government of India with what purpose is the government of India promoting the concept of mega food parks? What is a food park is important, and why? What is the special mega food park? How does it gets differentiated from a normal park? And what are the benefits of a special food park? First is to provide good infrastructure facilities for food processing industry, to increase the processing of perishable items and reduce wastage, to produce emerging and eco-friendly food processing technologies to entrepreneurs. Food processing is a part of main syllabus. So this is a good example to show that when from the mains itself, questions are framed. So we have to learn what are the steps that government is taking to improve food processing, value addition, and even the higher macro level is to double farmers' income. Double farmers' income. So what are the steps that the government is taking, and the features of that step, and the benefits of that step. So you have to understand everything. Mega food parks is just an indication. You have to understand what is the purpose, how does the mega food park help, and for example, they may ask you about textile parks. They may ask you about any parks that, for example, for semiconductor production. So you have to be looking out for these things. Then the 36th question is, the authorization for the withdrawal of funds from Consolidated Fund of India must come from. There are different types of fund. There is a consolidated fund, and there are other three types of public account. There are 3 types of fund. So you go through that and also go through who gives the authorization. What are the types of funds that are there? Who gives the authorization? And what kind of revenues goes into which fund? For example, the post office deposits goes into a particular fund, and the taxes goes into a different fund. So understand that what kind of funds are there, what kind of approvals are required, whether the money bill has to be passed or not, how the money bills are related to these funds, and what are the difference between money bill and other normal bill. Go through these things. These are important. So public account of India is there, consolidated fund of India is there, how it is authorized, and who authorizes it, and what kinds of funds. For example, they may give you an example that the taxes that government is collected goes into a particular fund. What is that fund? Or bonds. For example, government is collecting government bonds, treasury bonds. The funds that goes into the bond, that the government is taking from the public, to which fund does that go? And the interest payment that the government has taken loans from other countries or other public. So from which fund it will go out or it comes in. So go through these things, that these are important. All revenues received, revenues received by the union government in the way of taxes and other receipts for the conduct of government business are credited to. In this year itself, they have asked the same question. So contingency fund of India, public account, consolidated fund, and deposit and advanced fund. So go through these 3 accounts. These are important. And how it is, how do the government withdraw the amount from this? And what kinds of money goes into these funds? Contingency fund, public account, and consolidated fund. These are all important topics. Then 38th question. Microfinance is a provision of financial services to people of low income groups. This includes both the consumers and the self-employed. the services rendered under microfinance are. So this concept is more about microfinance. So you have to understand what is microfinance, why microfinance is needed, and what is the regulation. Who is regulating microfinance? Currently, there are payment banks, and there is also certain scams regarding loans. So you have to understand what is microfinance, why it is used, who are the beneficiaries, who is the regulator of this microfinance. The services rendered by this microfinance are credit facilities, saving facilities, insurance, fund transfers. So you have to go through the basics of it, basics of what is microfinance and why they are, who are the targets and who is the regulator for this. And for example, if government is supporting this, so what are the steps that the government is taking to support microfinance? I hope this is clear. Southeast Asia has captivated attention of global community over space and time as a geostrategically significant region. Which among the following is the most convincing explanation for this global perspective? It was a hot theater during the Second World War. It is a location between Asian powers of China and India. It was an arena of superpower confrontation during Cold War. It is a location between Pacific and Indian Ocean. Its preeminent maritime character. So this is international relations, and they have asked the question in international relations. International relations, and now in this question they have asked why a particular area is important. Why a particular geographical area is important. One, importance to the global level, at the global level, and important particularly to India. So in the future they may ask the Indian Ocean region, why Indian Ocean region is important to India, why South China Sea is important to India, why a particular island or particular area is important to India. So you have to understand why and what concept, in which context they're asking. This thing is the main topic, policies and the areas affecting India's interest. So go through this and at least understand what are the importance of a particular area, significant region, geostrategically significant region. This is important. You have to identify what are the geostrategically significant regions of the world for India and how it is important. And this is what you have to take away from these previous year's topics. Not the answer. I mean, answer you will get easily anywhere. But in the future, if you have to read what are the areas that you have to read, you have to find out the themes that are important. There is this direct explanation here, how to go about the topics. Geostrategically significant region. Write it down and go through it. Just Google search geostrategically significant region for India. You will get significant areas there. Okay, and the company, 48th question is, a company marketing food products advertises that its items do not contain trans fat. What does this campaign signify to the customers? So the first thing is, what is trans fats? What is trans fat? How does it affect humans? And where are the trans fats available? I mean, in which food products? The food products are not made of hydrogenated oils. So understand what is hydrogenated oils. Food products are not made out of animal fats or oils. Oils used are not likely to damage cardiovascular health of the consumers. So go through the basics of trans fats. What is trans fat? What is a fat? What is lipids? High density HDL, high density lipoproteins, HDL and LDLs, because I've asked about cardiovascular health also. And what is hydrogenated oils? Among the following, who are eligible to benefit from Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme? See, again, there is a scheme and they're talking about beneficiaries who are eligible for benefits. So these things, whenever you are reading a scheme, you have to understand who are the benefits, who are the beneficiaries, and what are the benefits. What is the benefit, and who it is targeting. I hope this is clear. We'll go to the next question. With reference to low-caste policy of India, consider the following statements. India wants to establish itself as an important regional player in the East Asian affairs. India wants to plug vacuum created by the termination of Cold War. India wants to restore its historical ties with the neighbors. Look-East policy, Act-East policy. Go through this. The basic purpose of this. The basic purpose and what are the steps that the government is taking to this policy. Next question is, when the annual union budget is not passed by the Lok Sabha, when the budget is modified and presented again, the budget is referred to the Rajya Sabha for suggestions. The Union Finance Minister has to resign. The Prime Minister submits the resignation to the Council of Ministers. So annual union budget is important. And how do you pass that budget? How it is passed? And the whole procedure. It's all given in the Lakshmikant. Read that, go through that. Next question is, under the Constitution of India, which one of the following is not a fundamental duty? So fundamental duties, fundamental rights, the rights, DPSP, preamble, constitutional amendments, and the articles. You have to bat all this. Duties, rights, DPSP, preamble, amendments, and articles. You have to bat all this. So they have asked about, under the Constitution, which of the following is not a fundamental duty? Then, with reference to Finance Commission of India, which of the following is correct? So read about the Finance Commission and the present Finance Commission that is there. Read about that. And what is the purpose of Finance Commission, and then the difference between the State Finance Commission and the Finance Commission at the center level. Then consider the following: right to education, right to equal access to public service, right to food. Which of the above is or are human rights or human rights under Universal Declaration of Human Rights? So go through this Universal Declaration of Human Rights and go through whether India has ratified it or not. And what does ratifying means? You have to understand also that. What is the ratifying means? And human rights, they have asked about Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So you can also read about the International Labour Organization, any organizations related to human rights. For example, National Human Rights Commission. Whether it's a constitutional body or not, and what are the powers that are given, and what are the laws, legislative powers that they have, statutory powers. The next question is, there is a concern over the increase of harmful algal blooms in the sea water. What could be the causative factors for this phenomena? The important thing is, what is algal blooms? How it is caused? How it is caused, if there are any measures for it, and how is it destructive, why it is bad, at least go through this, and what are the kind of algal blooms that are there. If you go through this, you would cover it entirely. What is the algal bloom, how it is caused, why it is bad, and what are the effects of algal blooms. That you have to understand. And then what are the measures that they have taken, or measures that can be taken. For example, here they are saying what are the positive effects: discharge of nutrients from estuaries, runoff from the land during monsoon, upwelling in the seas. So go through this, the reasons why algal blooms is happening, why it is bad, different kinds of algal blooms, and also the colors associated with it, and any measures to stop that. Next question is, consider the following: photosynthesis, respiration, decay of organic matter, volcanic action. Which of the above add carbon dioxide to the carbon cycle? So there are different cycles here: carbon cycle, nitrogen cycle, phosphorus cycle. Go through these cycles. The cycles are important, and also the main source of this nutrient, this minerals or whatever this product is. In carbon cycle or in phosphorus cycle, understand how the cycle is happening, what is the source, from where it is starting, where it is ending, the cycle. Go through the various sources of the carbon dioxide and in the carbon cycle also, in nitrogen cycle also, and also phosphorus cycle also. Go through those cycles. They are biogeochemical cycles. They are important. Recently, US decided to support India's membership in multilateral export control regimes called Australia Group Wassenaar Arrangement. What is the difference between them? See, again, they've asked the difference here. Always they'll ask you a difference. What is this agreement, Australia Group and Wassenaar Group, and what is the difference? So whenever there is something which is very close, whenever there are two things that are very close to each other, for example, they can ask you about Wi-Fi and Li-Fi. How does it differ? Wi-Fi and Li-Fi. How does it differ? Or in storage technologies, for example, the hard disks, HDD and SDD. Solid state drive, SSD, sorry. HDD and SSD. What is the difference between these two? What is a solid state device and what is a hard disk, HDD? So at least go through these concepts which they are there in your daily life. Wi-Fi, Li-Fi, HDD, SSD, all these things. And here they are given about Australia Group and Wassenaar Group. Go through these things. And they are asking India's membership in multilateral export control regimes. This is important. Multilateral export control regimes. Google search what are the different kinds of multilateral export control regimes are there, and see whether India is a member or not. And what are the member countries that are involved there. And if they are not in, if there is an opposition of India's membership, understand why they are opposing it. And whether it's, see, for example, Australia Group is an informal arrangement which aims to allow exporting countries to minimize the risk of assisting chemical and biological proliferation. Whereas Wassenaar Group is a formal group under OECD holding identical objectives. The Australia Group comprises predominantly of Asian, African, and North American countries, whereas the member countries of the Wassenaar Group are predominantly from the European countries. So we have to understand the basics of these groups. What are these groups? How are they formed? And the steps that are taken to control the spread of chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons. International steps that are taken. This is just two groups here. You have to go through the other things also. Nuclear weapons, biological weapons, and chemical weapons. Next question, 50th question. The surface of the lake is frozen in severe winter, but the water at its bottom is still liquid. This is about water. Properties of water, H2O. This can also be a chemical question, chemistry question. So this is how they'll ask you basics from 6 to 10 science standard books. Read about the properties of H2O, the bond, why oil doesn't mix in water, and what is the anomalous property of water. Ice is a bad conductor of heat. Since the surface of the lake is at same temperature as the air, when it is lost, the density of water is maximum at 4 degrees. Go through these things, go through the properties of water, and go through the basic science textbook. 51st question. The sandy and saline area is the natural habitat of an Indian animal species. The animal has no predators in that area, but its existence is threatened due to the destruction of its habitat. Which one of the following could be that animal? First of all, go through all these animals. These are all important because this already has been asked here. And here, see the manner in which they're asking questions. You have to not just know the animals, you have to know its the presence, where it is there, the habitats of that animal, and whether it is threatened or not. So we have to be able to identify an animal using this description itself. And the same level of, same type of question is also asked to find out the states also. They'll give you a different, for example, the climatic conditions, the rainfall of that state, and they'll ask you to guess about the state. So please go through these main animals that are there. Indian wild buffalo, Indian wild ass, Indian wild boar, and Indian gazelle, and also their habitats and whether there are any specific issues about that animal. And similarly, they have asked about the tigers. They've also asked about elephants and also one one on rhino. So go through these important animals. La Nina, El Nina is very important. Go through the concepts of La Nina, El Nina, and what are the effects that it has on Indian monsoon. The effects it has on Indian monsoon. And what is the difference between La Nina and El Nina? How is La Nina different from El Nina? This is important. Whether La Nina is good or El Nina is good, that you have to understand. And the technicalities of it. La Nina is characterized by an unusually cold ocean cold temperature in the equatorial Indian Ocean, whereas El Nino is characterized by unusually warm ocean temperatures in the equatorial Pacific Ocean. El Nino has adverse effect and La Nina has no effect. So you have to understand what is El Nino, what is La Nina, which one has what kind of effects on Indian monsoon. And currently, if there is any particular type of El Nino or La Nina, you have to go through that also. The third question, tendency of increased litigation was visible after the introduction of land settlement system of Lord Cornwallis in 1793. So you have to learn about the land settlement system of the Lord Cornwallis and also about different land settlement systems which were prevalent in that time. The reason for this is normally traced to the following provisions. Making Zamindaris position strong vis-a-vis Rayat, making East India Company an overlord of Zamindars, making judicial system more efficient. To go through this land revenue systems of Lord Cornwallis, also go through about Lord Cornwallis also Governor Generals, Governor General or Viceroys and their policies. So go through those things and also land revenue systems that the Britishers had. Then which one of the following observation is not true about Quit India movement? Quit India movement, there were so many times. Location where it has started, who were the participants, why was it started, how did it end, who were its leaders. So read about Quit India movement. I'm not concerned about this particular question. I'm mostly concerned about what was the nature of the movement, who was the leader of it, how was the same, what was the nature, spontaneous or it was planned, and what were the who were the participants here. These kinds of questions can be asked about any movement of modern history. So whenever you are going through any movements of modern history, keep these things in mind because UPSC has already given you an indication. They'll ask you about the nature, whether it was violent or non-violent, who was the leader, whether it was spontaneous or planned, whether it attracted labor class, what were the classes that were involved, whether labor class, business class, who was involved here. I hope things are getting clear. And if you have any doubts, you can post your queries in the chat section. 55th question. Which among the following provided a common factor for tribal insurrection? Tribal revolts and tribal insurrections are important. The leaders, the location, the reasons for that tribal revolt, and the administrative steps that the administration took after that revolt. Administrative steps taken after the revolt. These are important. All tribal revolts that have happened, go through that, by heart that, and also go through the leader, where it was, in which area, why it happened, the reasons, and the administrative steps that the government took at that point of time. So they are asking here, what was the common factor for tribal insurrection in India? What was the common reasons for all the tribal revolts? So there is a common theme across the tribal revolts. Go through that. For example, here they have said, they have given an example that new system of land revenue and taxation of tribal products are there. Influence of foreign religious and missionaries in tribal areas, rise of large money lenders, traders and revenue farmers as middlemen in tribal areas, the complete disruption of old agrarian systems, order of the tribal communities. So go through the tribal revolts, by heart the tribal revolts, and then in that tribal revolts, you have to find out the reasons, the leaders, the locations, and the administrative steps that were taken after the revolt. Next, 56th question. India maintained its early cultural contacts and trade links with Southeast Asia across Bay of Bengal. For this preeminence of early maritime history of Bay of Bengal, which of the following could be the most convincing explanations? Why did we have good relations, maritime relations? What was the reasons of it? As compared to other nations, India had a better shipbuilding technology in ancient and medieval times. The rulers of South India always patronized traders, Brahmins, and Buddhist monks. Monsoon winds across the Bay of Bengal facilitated sea voyages. So go through these questions here. I mean, those go through the theory part. Why India was it had a maritime trade, a history of in the area of Bay of Bengal, and what are the kings who were involved in the overseas trade, the international trade. And for example, if India was famous for any particular product, and what were the products that were famous? Now, they've asked about what's the difference between Bluetooth and Wi-Fi devices. Again, they've asked differences, and these are technologies and how they are different. So go through the basics of this. What is Bluetooth? What is Wi-Fi? How it is different? So Bluetooth uses particular radio frequency. Wi-Fi uses a different frequency. Bluetooth is used for wireless local area network. Wi-Fi is used for wide area networks. When information is transmitted between two Bluetooth devices, the devices have to be in line of sight. When Wi-Fi technology is used, they do not have to be in the line of sight. So go through the basics of Bluetooth, Wi-Fi technologies, and other connectivity technologies that are there currently. Now they are talking about Wi-Fi also, 5G networks. So go through that. What is the difference between 4G and 5G or 2G, or if there is any other technology? Next, with reference to micro irrigation, which of the following statements are correct? Fertilizers or nutrient loss can be reduced. It is only means of irrigation in the dry land farming. In some areas of farming, the seeding of groundwater can be checked. Go through what is micro irrigation, why it is used, and how does it compare with the traditional irrigation. And if there are other types of irrigations. And then 59th, sorry. With reference to the period of colonial rule in India, what are home charges? See, these are terms that are used in modern history, in ancient, medieval, and modern. If there is any particular term, you have to understand what the terms mean. That is important across the ancient, medieval, and modern. Here they are talking about home charges. Go through this concept here. What is home charges? So what was the reason for Mahatma Gandhi to organize a satyagraha on the behalf of Kheda? So Mahatma Gandhi is important. Gandhiji is important for your prelims and also mains. And the protest that he had taken, protests and the reasons. And you have to also go through about Mahatma Gandhiji's personal life also. I mean, personal life means what are the books he has written, what are the magazines that he had written, or newspapers, and other satyagrahas on the protest that he had undertaken. So go through all those things. I think it's time now. We'll end the session here. I think I've covered 60 questions. I'll cover the remaining questions later. I hope these sessions are useful. We have covered till 60. We'll cover the next part. So whenever you are going through the static portions or the previous years, the current affairs, please keep these things in mind. Whatever we have discussed here in the PYQ analysis, please keep this in mind and read. Keep an open mind. If the things are not available in the book, that is current affairs sources, or in the static books, please take use of Google search and get the information. So thank you. I'll end the session here. I hope things were useful. So we'll conduct the session tomorrow, next session tomorrow. I hope things are useful. Please make the best use of it, and have a good night, and please prepare for the prelims well. Thank you. If you have any doubts, please ask, or else we'll end the session here. Okay, then we'll end the session here. Thank you for coming. I hope these sessions are useful, and have a good night. Thank you.